Hello, in this video we're going to cover how to save and load Docker images from files and also touch on a little bit how Docker images are distributed. So typically people will upload their Docker images to a container registry such as Docker Hub or to something like the GitHub container registry, which you can integrate with your GitHub repos, or maybe to the Microsoft container registry. And so people will build containers locally, and then they will use Docker. Docker has a CLI for pushing, Docker CLI and push. So you can Docker image push to Docker Hub or a container registry, and then people can pull those down from the internet. They may have to be, logged in with some kind of authentication to get images if you want them to be private, and so on and so forth. But there are also ways to manage Docker images through files, and so I want to just quickly show you the way to do that with no need to log into anything or push to anything remote, and how you could export and import a Docker container. So don't get confused. I made this mistake before with Docker image import or Docker import. This actually just imports the file system and not the entire data that is necessary to run an image. So you're going to be using Docker save to export an image and then Docker load to import an image. So first we'll use Docker Save, and Docker Save will export a tar file, which is just a file archive which takes multiple files and packages them up into one file. And tars are common archives to use on Linux. You might be more familiar with something like a zip folder or a 7-zip archive, but a tar is kind of in the same world as that. And typically after something is packaged with the tar, it's compressed using a compression like gzip. So here Docker save is being piped, meaning the output of this program is being sent to this program, and then this program is compressing the output of this program, which was like a tar file, and then gzip is going to output a targz format, and this just means save to a file named this, the output of the gzip program. So we go from Docker saving your image to gzip to saving that gzip to a file, and that'll allow us to compress it as well. And then Docker load can take either a regular tar file with no compression or a targz file that is compressed. So first let's look at Docker's image save or Docker save. So we can use some Docker images that we have around. You should be familiar with the Hello World Go Docker file that I have here and the Pocket Base one. So let's just assume that you have all of this, and now realizing I have a bug here because I didn't pass the Docker build command up to I didn't uncomment that, and so that's not in my local remote, and people who use my repository won't be able to use it. So this is kind of the first way that people can use your Docker containers without having like access to some sort of container registry where you've put a custom container image. And the method is essentially they just get your configuration files, like our GitHub repository here, and they can rebuild everything that you did, everything that you built. They can just build it the same way on their system. And so that's one completely valid way. So to make sure that works, I'm going to just push up this mistake I made: git status, git add scripts, git commit -m, uncomment the build cmd, and now that I've fixed that, I can go ahead and run this /scripts/pocketbase, and that'll build my Pocketbase image, and I can also build my Go runner. Oh man, it's just actually running my container as well, so I'll just hit Control D. That accidentally exited my terminal, so Control Shift tick mark, and I will try this again. Now I've built the container or the image and run the container. Now I can do the same thing with this one as well. So it's going to build it and then run it. And another little bug here, this doesn't really need to be interactive, I don't think. So now that we've built both those container and I do those images, my bad, we do Docker images, we'll see we have our PB latest was what we tagged it, PB latest, and we also have our Golang custom. So what we're going to do now is save those containers to files. And so to do this, I'm going to create a new subfolder of Docker called images, or I could call it image archives. And what I'm going to do is do a Docker save. And we can look at the manual for this. It takes, you can either do the Linux file direction to direct the output, or you can specify an output file. So I'll just specify an output file, save-o to Docker image archives, and I'll call it go runner.tar. And I need to specify the actual image I want to save. So I have a local image called Golang custom. So we should see a tar file show up in image archives. Might take a while because it's pretty large. And now we have a tar file there. We can use du-h for disk usage human readable to look at docker/image archive/go runner.tar and see that that's 294 megabytes, which makes sense because that's how big our image was when we looked at Docker images. So we should be able to do the same here with Pocket-based runner, PB runner, call it anything, .tar, and we'll say PB latest, which was our tag, and then we get that was faster because it's smaller, and now we can do du-h on Pocket-base runner and see that that's about 41 megabytes because that was the size of our image. So just want to point out here, so we're not compressing anything, but pointing out here that these are quite large files, and as soon as you pass the threshold of something like 50 megabytes, GitHub is going to start changing how it handles your files because your repositories are going to get challenging to pull when you have large files. So Git will give you, I believe, a warning about using the large file system, and then eventually GitHub will let you use a large file system, but the free version of GitHub limits your maximum file size to 2 gigabytes. So there are just limitations around big files, and typically people don't keep big files in Git repositories. But there would be ways you could distribute these files, like you could send it via cloud storage or some other method, a USB drive to somebody. You could just put this on a USB drive and give somebody the USB drive, and they could recreate your image. And we'll see how to recreate it in a second. But another way to make this a little bit smaller is you can use gzip compression. So I have gzip. I say gzip, just gzip, and yeah, so it's running which gzip. This is something that probably came with Git Bash. It's a compression software, and so I'm just going to do it this time instead. We're going to go not to with the Go runner, we're not going to go to -o, that tar file, but instead we're going to go to Golang custom. We're going to pipe that output from standard out to gzip, and then gzip, we can say gzip maybe --help, and we'll see that gzip says f is force. You see anything to a file. Quiet, recursive, synchronous, test, verbose, fast. So we'll just use the caret symbol, or the less than, greater than symbols, to redirect the standard output of gzip to a file. So we will do that. Docker save, we'll pass it the name of this image. We'll pipe that output to gzip. Pipe that to gzip, and pipe output that to replace any file that we have called docker image archives gorunner.tar.gz for gzip. So tar, the output of gzip is now replacing whatever's at this path, and it's working to export that image. And so now we can do a du human readable, disk usage human readable for docker image archives, and I'm going to do /* to get each of those files. So we have 294 megabytes for the runner tar and 87 for the tar.gz. So we got a good compression there. And then we could do the same thing for the Pocket Base as well. So we'll say pb runner.tar.gz, and we'll do pb latest. That should be pretty quick. And do our du, and see that we've gotten down to 14 megabytes for that tar.gz file, so that's pretty good. So now we can see how we can use docker load to load those images. And to stress this even more, I can remove the images, docker rmi. So let's do docker images, and see we have pb latest, pb alpine, golang custom. So I'll docker rmi all of those. I'll do rmi pb latest, pb golang custom, golang custom 2, pb alpine. You see those are all gone. Those are not in my local images anymore, but I can now import by using a docker load, not docker import, but docker load, and then say the just the file that you want to import. So docker /image archive /gorunner.tar. Let's just do the tar file. Whoops. So let's check the manual there quickly. Docker load is going to be load from input, read from an archive file instead of standard in. So we would have to redirect this, use this redirect operator in the opposite direction to point that file into load if we want to do it that way, or we could use the -i flag. So I'll just point that into, put the contents of this file to the standard input of load, and now we got loaded image, and we have Docker images. We have that Golang custom. And you can actually also do this with a straight GZ file, and it will decompress it for you without the need for your own gzip, and then it will load that. So you can see there's really not a downside as far as we can tell from using the compressed version. So let's go ahead and do the same thing except for PB runner. And you notice it has all of the metadata as well. It has Golang custom, and this one has PB latest. And so it's just as if we had built those images locally. So let's just double check that we can run one of those. We'll Docker images, and let's see if we can indeed run this PB latest image that we now imported, and you see it works just fine. So that's great. We didn't need to build this image. We can just have this tar.gz and Docker, and we can put it all together. So let's go ahead and delete the tar files, because those are the larger variants. And then let's say we want to use these files rather than in here. Let's say we just want to push these as releases in our GitHub repository. So releases are a way that you can essentially say, here is the output of my code in my repository. Here is what my code is meant to create. You know, the actual thing that maybe it's an installer that you can download and install the program. Or in this case, we could say our release is a couple of tar.gz Docker images, and that people can download those images and import them rather than having to go to build them themselves with our files or go to a container registry. So let's create a new release. Maybe we should push our code up first. So let's go to our repository and git status. We should probably git ignore this very large thing right here. So let's put a new git ignore, Control C, click on Docker, Control V, and ignore all of image archives. And then we should probably do a shell script, new file. We'll just copy, Pocket-Base copy, and rename it to export images.sh. So we'll go ahead and copy over our Golang custom builder and copy over our Pocket-Base builder. And then we can go ahead and Docker save with gzip. So Docker save, gzip, and we'll want to go to /image archives, Docker/image archives. So copy relative path and paste that here. Change to / Docker image archives, Golang custom. We'll just call it go.tar.gz, and then pb.tar.gz, and we should probably test this. So we might want to delete these and run /export /scripts/export. Let's open a new terminal. /scripts/export images.sh. We'll build those two images. May take a little time. And then it saved those images to go.tar.gz. Guess we're still waiting on the Pocket-Base one. and there's the Pocket Base one. So that worked, and we should double check that if we should maybe clean up here after ourselves. Docker, we don't need to clean up. We'll just say Docker images, Docker RMI, PB, and that'll automatically be latest, I believe, and then Golang custom. Then the question is, can we load those images? We'll basically just say, can you reverse these? Docker load, and import, and Docker images, we have them, Docker run --rm pb, and it runs our server at port 95 inside the container. So I exited that, Docker ps, it's gone. So this looks pretty good, and we can say import images, export images. Add a section to the README that says importing and exporting images, Docker images with files. This will say prerequisites, you will need the gzip program, and running should be exporting and importing. To export, we'll do this one. And to import, we'll do this one. Let's see how this looks. Okay, you'll need gzip, exporting, importing, looks good. We have a git ignore, ignoring all the image archives. Only issue is they might not have this image archives folder, so we can just do /* so that we can push that up to Git, and they'll automatically have that folder and not have to create it. So let's close out and do a git status, git add dot git commit -m, adding a feature to import and export images using files, git push. So one way we can create releases in our Git repo is just to upload those files manually. So we can create a new release, and we'll call this Docker tar gz images. We'll call it v0, version 0. And to create a tag, I don't know if I think people might, I don't know exactly how people will tag things. If the tag isn't meant for production, add a pre-release after the version like this. It's common to prefix your names with the letter. So maybe something like v0 point 0.0.1. Let's just be very small, and it's going to be 0.0.1 alpha. And we'll say every 0.0.1 alpha. We could say this contains two compressed Docker images to run a Go program and Pocketbase. Then we will mark it as not production ready. We'll add binaries, and we can drag those from our file system, or we might be able to just click here and drag these. No, that did not work. So let's go back and reveal in File Explorer and then drag these here. So now those large files, we don't actually have to push those into our code base because we Git ignored them, but we can upload them as releases so that people who come to our Git repo, not for the purpose of looking at our code, but for the purpose of using the output of our code, can come here and just simply get our Docker images. And it would be better practice if in this release, we wrote some more notes about how they would use it, like generate some release notes. Or something like that, but just for a first attempt, this is good. We can see that we got 86 megabytes and 13 megabytes here, and we can go ahead and publish this release. And now my repository is private, but what would happen is if this were public, somebody could go find my releases, and they find that I have one tag of release. Here's the tag. Like they can click on that one, and they can see all the versions I have pushed to that tag, and then they can see the actual assets that I have here. So they could come and download this pb-tar-gz, and then they could just go and use that, and they don't have to pull anything from Docker Hub, and they don't have to build anything locally. They simply Docker load that tar-gz file, and they're able to run my image, which is really cool. So that should wrap it up for this video. You've learned how to take Docker images that you've built or pulled onto your machine and export them to files, and then import them from files, and also how to upload outputs of your programming activities to the releases in GitHub so that people can come and download your code for using it. So thank you for watching, and that's all for this one.